last night I got done with work and I was in the mood to just relax and watch a movie. But I have been so drained by a lot of Hollywood movies right now. And the reason I'm saying that is it's just, it feels like these things are just being built by algorithms. And I think largely they are. I know they have test audiences to determine audience A liked it this much, audience B liked it that much, and so forth. And then they'll do tons of reshoots. And it seems like they're built in many ways more by committee than through the desire to create a piece of art that might take some risks and be truly entertaining. I also could just be getting old and I'm getting more cynical in terms of I've seen so many different movies that maybe everything's feels so familiar now. But I do think just with how everything in society is going, it's so algorithmically driven and data driven that art is losing its heart. And you also have AI coming into play now, and I don't know how much that's relevant to movies. But again, I wanted something very, very different. So last night, YouTube, ironically, and this is where the algorithm is useful, advertised to me a new movie I hadn't seen any information about before, and it was called Homestead. And it caught my eye because of, I like disaster movies, and this is how the algorithm, yes, I know I was just dissing the algorithm, but I'm fine with it sending me relevant recommendations for things I might actually enjoy. But anyway, because there was a nuclear explosion and it looked like kind of a survival movie, I was like, oh, this looks pretty cool. So I looked into it more, and it was called Homestead. Now, this is actually a faith-based movie by a company that's starting to push out more movies. A lot of these are looking, higher quality. Unfortunately, it wasn't in any of the usual streaming platforms like the ones like Netflix and whatnot. So I did sign up. It was pretty cheap for a month of Angel Studios so that I could watch this. Now, one concern I have when watching faith-based movies is sometimes these can feel significantly more like a sermon than a movie. And when I'm going to watch a movie, I am looking more to be entertained, though I'm more than happy and often delighted by some of the messages that come out of these, but I want them to come more naturally. It's kind of that like show versus tell thing. But this one looked like it was definitely leaning more towards showing versus, hitting me over the head with a hammer, so to speak. I decided to give it a shot. I'm going to give a non-spoiler review to start. Then I'm going to move into spoilers, and I'll give you a warning before that in case you haven't seen this movie yet. And then I'll share some of my personal feelings. Before I do that, though, the sponsor for this review is My Own Story, a novel that I wrote that's in the science fiction fantasy genre. A lot of themes like Tolkien, or C.S. Lewis with Narnia, or even like Ted Decker's Circle trilogy, some like multi-world, multi-dimensional components. So if you enjoy that type of literature, please check it out. There's a lot more information in the description below. All right, so Homestead. This movie kicks off extremely well. I was very, very impressed with the cinematography. You're in a boat with a couple of these guys that are approaching Los Angeles, essentially. There's some anticipation growing as the ship gets closer among the characters, and you're like, oh, I wonder what's about to happen. And soon you discover they're actually have nuclear explosives down at the bottom of their ship, and the Coast Guard comes and they start a frantic trek towards the coast to get as close as they can, and then poof, we have our nuclear explosion. Again, these are non-spoilers. This all happens in the first few minutes, but the way the aerial shots were taking place and the acting, I was hugely impressed with everything. So I was like, I made a good choice here. This movie looks like it's going to turn out pretty well. Then we move to the first main-ish character in the movie, and this is someone named Evie. So Evie sees this explosion. She calls her husband Theo, who's in the middle of LA. He also sees this explosion. They're like, oh, wow, we're going to have to go to Ian's homestead, which is, I believe, on the western side of the Rocky Mountains. And it's a place that this family, Ian Ross is his name, but he has an extended family. They've all gotten together, and he's kind of driven prepping in this big homestead, again in the mountains, that his family can all come to if things start going south. So the movie continues from there. There's blackouts on the East Coast. They kind of allude to the fact that the Russians are involved there. And the first 20 minutes was exactly what I was looking for in terms of a disaster movie. Just tension building, things going wrong, people are flooding the stores and there's havoc and so forth. You're like, okay, this is, I'm excited to see people get into this homestead and see how they handle this social unrest as the U.S. government is starting to crumble. This is where I need to move into some spoilers. So if you would not like to hear these spoilers, you can hop out. But before I get into those, just to finish this non-spoiler section, the rest of the movie is about the folks in the homestead coming to terms with you can only have so many people in there and survive, even while you have lots of other people outside that you may feel very compelled to help, but can you without dying yourself? So it's a very, very interesting theme they explore. Whether or not this theme is effectively handled, I'll share more of that in the spoiler section, but this is the time to head out if you don't want specific details. All right, moving into the spoilers. So Ian and Jenna Ross, who are head of this homestead, we move the full focus over to them. They have a daughter named Claire, and she's homeschooled and kind of complaining, oh, I'm not going to be able to go to a prom and stuff like this. So they're doing a little bit of character development. It's a pretty sheltered situation. But Ian's smart enough to know that as things start to unravel across the U.S., he's going to need some military support. So he calls this guy named Jeff Erickson, and then Jeff and his wife Tara. And there are multiple kids, but there's really only one that's relevant in this movie named Abe. They all rush off to this homestead, and very quickly they establish a more rigid military or guard at the homestead. At the same time, people are starting to move in towards the gate of the homestead, and Ian and Jenna are wrestling with, again, they're the homestead owners, if they should let people in. So Jenna in particular, she's the main faith-based person in the movie. She's narrating kind of how she's really relying on God to navigate this situation and sharing her desire and her wish to try her best to help people who are outside, where Ian, who is also a man of faith, is wrestling with a similar desire, but also the fact that he has to make sure that his family and everyone are protected. And he's got a spreadsheet of how much food and everything is involved. At the same time, the main military guy, Jeff here, he keeps pushing Ian for you guys got to be much more strict. We need a hardcore perimeter. You might have to shoot people that are coming on the land. And he's moving Ian a little more towards that hardcore viewpoint of this is our homestead. We have to protect it for the sake of our family. Sorry, everyone out there, sad for you, but you're going to have to figure things out. So the movie continues, and this is where I have one of my primary issues with the movie is it's noted through dialogue that the country is essentially unraveling, but all the scenery is very beautiful blue skies and these wonderful shots of this mansion that's the central piece of this homestead in the Rocky Mountains. And even the people outside the gate, they're well clothed. They look like they're well fed. Even when they're fussy about trying to get in, it's so tame. But again, I don't think this movie's desire was to have that more gritty demeanor, that other movies might have like this. And again, I was looking for, when I was watching this movie, something a little bit more tame, but it ratcheted tame to the most tame you could possibly have, let's put it that way. So I just didn't feel that tension. Nothing felt extremely dire as, again, the days passed. So eventually the son of the military guy, Jeff, he's wanting to be more of a man, and he's he wants to take up a guard post. And his mom, Tara, is kind of against this, but Jeff, of course, being this hardcore military guy, let him get the gun, and he can watch the basically the backyard area, because nothing bad's going to happen there. Of course, what happens? A couple of hunters come in, and for whatever reason, they're using their gun and the scope on the gun to try to see what's going on, and they notice Abe and another guard sitting there. What is that? What is that? And they just keep staring at these two kids with their gun. And Abe's frantically calling his dad, what should I do? What should I do? So the dad says, fire a warning shot. So he fires a warning shot. Now, these hunters just completely ignore the warning shot and keep pointing their gun, trying to figure out where this warning shot comes from. Because of that foolish decision, of course, Abe sees them as a continued threat. His dad's like, "You're just going to have to shoot him." And Abe shoots him, shoots one of the hunters, and the other hunter runs off. Now, they bring that hunter back to the community. They do their best to save them. They also have like a medic unit in this homestead. I mean, it's got kind of people for everything in this place because, again, the goal is for long-term survival. But unfortunately, the hunter dies and Abe is completely devastated. And I thought they did that well. Like the emotions there. This is where the tension actually felt real. I'm like, okay, this is feeling more like how things might actually be. Real problems, real pain, and yeah. But then this is where the movie took kind of a turn that I thought oversimplified the trauma that Abe felt. So the daughter of the homestead owners, her name is Claire, and her and Abe have been kind of crushing on each other. So Abe one evening goes and he wants to talk to Claire, and he's spilling his guts about just how traumatized he is about killing this hunter, which is totally understandable. Now, it's sweet that Claire says, "Hey, can I pray for you?" And she says a nice prayer for him. Again, that's wonderful, and that would help a situation like this. But then they go and spend the night just chatting and in the greenhouse, and she's teaching him some gardening skills, and the morning comes, and by the morning he's completely healed of his trauma of literally killing someone. And although I appreciate, again, we'll say the sweetness of the situation, it just ratchets down the tension and really how something like this would play out. It's harder to suspend my disbelief when someone recovers that quickly of something so traumatic. But again, this movie isn't going for the hardcore tension, and it's trying to share hope in the midst of really, really challenging situations. So I can appreciate that. At the same time, it was a little fast. Let me put it that way. The movie continues on, and eventually the sister at the beginning of the movie, Evie, comes to the homestead, and of course she's let right in. And everyone outside's like, "Why does she get to go in?" And they're starting to get a little more fussy. But again, it's just like mild fussing. No one's storming the gate. And this isn't like a huge gate either. And yeah, there's a couple of guards with guns, but they're not being too mean to the people kind of like clamoring out there. And Evie's wondering, she's nervous because Theo, her husband, hasn't made it yet. But anyway, that kind of settles down. But soon after that, Theo does arrive, and he's indicating that maybe FEMA is starting to get their act together. He was in Vegas, but later we find out he actually had medication that he's no longer on. So a lot of the information he's providing about things getting better outside actually aren't. The government, the United States, is still in a really, really bad place. That being said, we keep getting scenes of beautiful blue skies and birds tweeting, and it just seems really, really chill. The movie climaxes with essentially a government official in a nearby city wants to come and take over the homestead, and he brings a SWAT team, and there's a shootout. In the shootout, literally no one gets hurt except for Ian, the homestead owner. He does get shot. When you're watching this, you're pretty sure he's not going to die, but he's critical, and they wheel him in, and his wife is praying over him, and she's very concerned, and she's providing a narrative of, I feel like I need to do what I must do. So she goes, and then even though her husband was like frantically trying to make sure everything was situated so they could survive the winter with enough food and whatnot, she goes and literally lets everybody into the homestead. So I struggled with that one a little bit, because it's like, when I'd like to see the spouses acting a little bit more as a team, but it's kind of felt like she had to wait for her husband to get shot before she could go do the good deed. And then, of course, he eventually wakes up and he's like, "Wait, what happened? How long have I been out?" And she's like, "Oh, I let everybody in, and one guy was like good at making chimneys, and he helped with making our greenhouses, work better so that we can actually have plants grow throughout the winter. And these other people were like making these potato seedlings work better. So by bringing everybody in, everything magically started working great." When it comes to like the realism of a situation that everyone would have been in here, The practical side is there would have been a lot more challenges. So I'm not saying a miracle couldn't happen, but it moves so quick. So the couple of points I just wanted to make for me personally is how quick really bad things could turn really good. For the sake of the timing of the movie, that's fine. In reality, I definitely appreciate prayers, and I definitely believe in prayer, but things don't always work out that smoothly and that beautifully. And sometimes it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of faith to get wherever you're going. And the movie just hastened that so quickly that it bothered me a little bit. I'll just leave it at that. That being said, the movie's got 2-hour runtime. They got to move things along, and I know this movie actually, in the end, is a setup for a series. So they introduce a lot of characters. A couple characters didn't even mention because I think they were just brought in because they'll be more relevant in later episodes. But for this as a standalone movie, I might say it was fine. I would have liked it to be a little bit more realistic. I still appreciated because I wanted something more chill. I definitely got something more chill. It was a little bit too chill, and it did set up some compelling character dynamics that I think might solve some of the things I was complaining about. Because when I was looking at the previews for some of the upcoming episodes, I think, even though the group from the outside came in and everything started well, my guess and expectation is the whole point of this series is how once you have two people in a room, you're going to start having some strife and challenges and so forth. So now we have a whole bunch of people stuck in this homestead trying to survive. And how are they all going to get along? And what are all the melodramas and the drama and everything? How is that going to play out? In summary, it was a nice setup for a series. As a movie by itself, I felt it had a good beginning and then a long middle, and then not really much of an ending because, again, this is setting up a much larger series. That's my review of Homestead. Those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed it. Curious what you thought of the movie. If you shared any of my opinions or you disagree with them, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, again, it was nice seeing something different, and I really appreciate the effort that the creators put into this movie because there was a lot more heart in this one, I could tell, than I've seen in some of the algorithmically made movies. Again, I'm not picking on all movies that come out. That's the vibe I've been getting. Hope you have a wonderful day, and take care. Bye-bye.